So as Bob mentioned, we're going to be doing some additional discussion on Gateway Abstract. And then we're going to throw a little bit of a curveball, but I think it'll be a welcome one in the schedule, and that is I'm not going to speak all the way until 12:15, but we are still going to go through that time slot. We've decided to allocate some time for Fred to speak as well. He's going to speak beyond abstract and talk through CNAVs and some of the things we're seeing relating to the budgeting process. So I'll only be probably just 20 or 30 minutes. And then finally, before I get going on this, I do want to introduce a couple people that we have from the agency. I'm Matt Parkinson. I'm the Deputy Commissioner and Chief of Staff. I think this is my 10th Auditors Conference, and it feels like I've spoken about this topic at half of them, so I know you all are well familiar with me and with this topic. But I want to introduce Scott Maitland. And Scott, if you'd like to say something, you certainly can.
Hello, I'm Scott Maitland. Jeff Brewster was in my role before me, so if you remember Jeff, I'm the new Jeff. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. My number is on the DLGF website. My email is on the DLGF website. I'd like to be available to all of you for questions. I might not know the answers, but I will try and be your single point of contact. So please introduce yourself throughout the day. I'll be roaming around probably next to Matt. So I just wanted to say hello and put a face to the name.
And then we also have with us today Caitlin Jackson. I won't make Caitlin say anything, but Caitlin is a new budget field representative with our team. She is 9 days into the job. So think of all your toughest questions and make sure to direct them right to her. But Caitlin is going to be serving in the same capacity as your current field representative. We have 12 on staff, and Caitlin makes 13, and we have a 14th that's beginning in just a couple weeks. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through, as Bob mentioned, some of the more technical matters with Gateway Abstract. A good portion of this is going to be review. It's covering things that we've mentioned in previous either auditors conferences or more personalized meetings with you and your staff. But as we're getting ready to go into abstract season in the next couple months, we want to make sure that these things are fresh in everyone's mind. As Bob mentioned, Gateway Abstract is the abstract for 2019. We are going live with it. So any questions and ideas that people have, we're sort of in that window right now where it's important to hear from you. And as Scott mentioned, we're going to be around certainly through middle of the afternoon today, and I'd love to talk with you one-on-one if you have things you want to go through. So we're going to start by covering a few of the individual text files, the 7 text files that Bob mentioned. The first 2 are familiar to you if you've been in the auditor's office, through a prior spring. They are the tax data and the adjustments files. These 2 files, when put together, are a summary of all the tax bills in your county, and you submit them to legislative services and to our office, and we go through a compliance review process and get back to you typically in April or May. These are going to form the basis for Gateway Abstract. We're working with legislative services on the actual submission itself. Where we think this is heading, and I think this should be good news for you, where we think this is heading is that your upload through Gateway is going to constitute your submission to LSA and DLGF. So there's not going to be 2 different submissions with the same set of files. We'll get finalized details out to you somewhere around the new year or so. But again, the tax data file itself is a record of the tax bills. It contains parcel numbers and taxpayer names and overall taxes due. The adjustments file contains data about deductions, exemptions, and credits on a parcel level. And these 2 things really make up the foundation of Gateway Abstract. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th files are ABTax SUP, ABCERT rate, and TIF sum. The ABTax SUP file is a supplemental file. That's what the SUPP means. It's a supplemental file on top of tax data and adjustments containing some of the information that goes into an abstract but isn't listed in the tax data and adjustments files. So think statement processing charges, think different penalty data, delinquency data. That's in this supplemental file. And then we have the abcert rate file, which looks the exact same as the certed rates file. Certed rates is one of the two text files that goes out with your budget order. You're going to upload what's effectively an equivalent file, abcert rate, which is exported from your tax software and imported into Gateway. It contains, again, the exact same information, tax rates. What we're looking to verify is that the data that forms the tax rate component of your abstract in Gateway lines up with the tax rates that were certified. The TIF summary file, it should be a short file, even for, if you're in, for instance, one of the donut counties that has a lot of TIF districts, it'll still be a short file. All the TIF summary file contains is the unique identifier for your TIF district and the name of the TIF district. But the contents of the TIF portion of the abstract are really populated through the TIF tax file. And we've talked about this at, I think, the last conference. This is, of all the steps forward that I think Gateway Abstract makes compared to some of the data that we have now, the TIF tax file and the data that you're submitting through it, that's where we really take the biggest step forward. So this is the intersection of the taxing district data or the tax data file and your TIF district data. And what you're submitting here is the parcels within a TIF district so that we're able to join that together with the individual taxes owed data. It provides a lot of insight into TIF districts in a way that nothing we have today does. There are a lot of people that are really excited about this, from financial advisors that we've spoken with and legislative services agency that gets a lot of, they receive a lot of questions from legislators, and we do as well, on matters that there's just not a way to answer right now. And the TIF tax file opens up a lot of things for us. Finally, there's the TIF tax supplemental file. There's some symmetry looking at the tax data and adjustments file. This is extra data around penalties and delinquencies, things that wouldn't be available in those other files. So, and that's the end of the text files. We go through the text files not because you're likely to spend a lot of time looking at the files themselves, but they are going to form the foundation for what it is that you upload. Where we really hope folks spend their time when it comes to the abstract is on the portion that Bob spent a little bit of time on. And that's the review section and taking a look at the contents. So I'm going to cover a quick item or two, and then we're going to look at Gateway Abstract together, and I'm going to show you a couple different new things that we're working on compared to what you would have seen earlier this past spring. I mentioned this one a little bit earlier. The rates, our control around rates, this is a really important piece of it. What we're trying to validate is that the rates that are used for tax bills and for tax calculations line up with those that are certified in your budget order in every case that they're supposed to. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, because the one exception is phase-in rates. How many folks in the room have a phase-in taxing district in their county? Okay, not that many hands. These are a situation where tax rates are phased in over a period of 4 years following an annexation. That's the one exception where your rates aren't necessarily going to line up with the budget order. But even that we're controlling for within Gateway. As Bob mentioned, the county review section is really where we're hoping that you spend a lot of time. If that was ever true, it's in the first year. We really hope that people take time to review the material that's uploaded through Gateway Abstract, ask questions of the Auditor of State's office, ask questions of us. If you see something that you're not sure about or doesn't line up with what you expected, the aim with Gateway Abstract from the very get-go was to move us out of data entry, which is how a lot of time is spent on the Excel abstract today, and move us into qualitative reviews of the information that's being presented to us through the abstract. So I would echo Bob and say as much information as you can provide on these county review questions, that's a good thing. It's likely to reduce the amount of back and forth between AOS and your office, or between our team and your office, or our team and the Auditor of State. Bob was right. We do see, and this is true with other things where we get feedback as well, like ratio studies from assessors' offices. It's a lot more common than you would think to get answers to a question of why did your assessed value go up, and the answer to that question is because it's higher than it was last year, which it's fine, it's true, but it doesn't get us to an understanding. What we're trying to verify is that the numbers that were used in the tax bills and used in the abstract are reliable. So we're going to pause for just a minute, and I'm going to move over to our development version of Gateway. And we're going to do just a kind of a quick reminder of a few of the screens. Then I'm going to hop back into the slides and then back to Gateway just one more time. So the abstract is on Gateway, on the live version of Gateway that you all have access to and use for budget form submissions and debt submissions and all those related matters. What we're looking at today is our development environment because I want to show a few different things that we have in dev that aren't out on the production version of Gateway. We're going to use Adams County. All I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to make this really fast because I know many of you in the room have seen Gateway Abstract and you're familiar with what it looks like. But so as a reminder, since we're going to be going back into abstract season before we know it, the abstract is set up with a menu on the left side. The pre-abstract survey that Bob mentioned is one of the first things that you'll do, likely in January, filling out information about any changes in your county, phase-in districts. There may be some property tax relief type questions in there. So January is when you'll likely be using this for the first time in 2019. And then I'll get into just a really quick demonstration of a few different pages. The file upload, it's still going to work the same as it did when you did the test version of it this past spring. You'll upload the 7 files, and when you've uploaded them successfully, you'll see these green bars that appear. It's the visual indicator that you were successfully able to upload files. But that's where I really want to, again, emphasize one more time. We're really hoping that folks will take time to take a look at the contents themselves, the data that actually is presented on the screen. I think there's a common tendency throughout our Gateway applications to see that something passes file validation. And what I mean by that is the text file is in the correct format, didn't contain too many characters or things we weren't expecting. But it's not enough to just pass the actual file validation itself. What we really hope folks do is take a look at the questions, take a look at the assessed values that are presented, and the levies, and compare those to what you know about your county better than anybody else, and verify that they're correct. We've got a taxing district configuration and information section. This has counts of parcels, so this is one of the best places to do just sort of a sanity check. If you know you have a taxing district with 300 parcels, and for some reason after the upload 30 parcels are listed here, that's a clear sign that something went wrong in your file upload. You're going to see that other places too. Your AVs are going to be too low, or your levy is going to be off. But this is meant to be a check, a place that people can verify that the contents line up with what they expected them to be. And then again, just because I'm moving quickly through this, I don't want to take too much time on things that most of you have seen before. The basic sections that we have on the abstract on the left side are assessed values. We've got a summary page, and then you can break it down to gross and see your different deductions and net. So this is high level what the assessed value summary page looks like. We also have a rate and levy section. So this is, if you think about the Excel abstract, this is most similar to sections 2 through 4. We give you the ability at different points to look at it by taxing district or by individual taxing unit and fund. There's a lot of navigation options where you can drill in and drill out. This is meant to give you ways to identify things that might either be listed incorrectly in your local tax software or things that have been presented incorrectly here in Gateway Abstract. But the goal is to be really nimble and giving you the ability to sort of navigate around in ways that are going to be most useful to you. We have a total taxes section. This is pretty similar to section 5, the final section on the Excel abstract. It's got credit information and then delinquency and penalty information. Yes, that's a great question from Nick. The question was, can you export this to Excel? And the answer is going to be yes. And I'm actually going to show you a version of it that we have that's working on a different portion of it in just a minute. And then the TIF summary section. The TIF data, again, like I mentioned before, this is, I think, going to be the biggest step forward, recognizing the overlap between taxing districts and TIF districts, trying to answer those questions from taxing units, as difficult as they may be, about which TIF districts overlap with me, what's the impact of TIF on me, and I recognize how subjective and difficult those questions are, but I think having the data available to us is a big step forward in that conversation. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to come back to show Gateway one more time. One of the newest sections that we've been working on when it comes to the Gateway abstract is circuit breaker adjusted rates. So if you've been around for a spring before, you know that each spring you have a circuit breaker adjusted abstract that's distributed to you and is used for settlement purposes. We're going to be doing something that's very similar to that through Gateway, and there's going to be a couple portions of it that are a little bit more automated than the last version of it. So circuit breaker adjusted rates are going to be computed after the abstract is approved. We're still working on the actual mechanism for it. I think there's a good chance that the state is going to go ahead and trigger the generation of these circuit breaker adjusted rates after AOS gets through its review. But we'll have, again, final answers for that as we get around to the spring. Rates are going to be exported, and you will be importing them into your tax and bill software for use during the settlement process. So the file that we're going to use for that is, and you're going to notice that we're not very clever with our file names. We're calling this ABCBS rates, which is kind of a way of saying abstract circuit breaker rates. It's going to look very similar to the sorted rates file, the one that comes out with your budget order, with only one extra field containing some extra data on the end for those circuit breaker adjusted rates themselves. Circuit breaker adjusted rates, if you're not familiar with them, they're used to modify the actual rates certified and used during the abstract process to come up with numbers that can be used to be sure that dollars are distributed, property tax dollars are distributed to the taxing units and their funds in the correct proportions. So some of the key items that we have to be aware of with circuit breaker adjusted rate calculations are exempt funds. So that's typically going to be a referendum. For one last year in 2019, Lake and St. Joseph County also have a set of exempt funds, but typically we're talking referenda. And then debt service funds, which are protected from circuit breaker, meaning they're the last ones to receive 1%, 2%, and 3% credits. They almost never do, only in rare occasion would they. Exempt funds never receive the 1%, 2%, and 3% circuit breakers. The circuit breaker adjusted rates are going to be listed out to 4 decimal points, similar to your tax rates. And then there's one point that we want to stress. We may even do some things timing-wise to just reduce the risk that we mislead somebody. The circuit breaker adjusted rates aren't used on the actual tax bills themselves. I'm not familiar with anybody with that mistake having been made in the past, but the risk would be high. If somebody does that, it would be a big deal. So circuit breaker adjusted rates are for settlement purposes, not for actual tax bill calculations. Just something to keep in mind when you get these files. And then just one last abstract slide, and then I'm going to go back to showing you something within Gateway. We are working, as Nick asked, we're working on a series of reports. They're going to be viewable to you in Excel and likely in PDF. They're going to mirror the major sections in the abstract as we've laid them out. And we're still at a point right now where if somebody wants a really specific report, contact us. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Scott or Fred, you can reach out to the Auditor of State's office. If there's something that you think would be useful to you, reports are something that we can kind of continue to build as needs arise. So I'm going to navigate back one more time to our development version of Gateway Abstract. We have a new page that's available on Dev, and we'll be moving up to Live, so you can work with it sometime pretty soon, for circuit breaker adjusted rates. And this is what that page looks like. What we have, so we're looking at Adams County. We've already computed it for Adams County for the purpose of today's demonstration. What we have is a list of each of the taxing districts and the unit types and the units. the individual funds, some various characteristics about those funds, whether they're exempt or protected or came through a referendum, or have TIF assessed value included, like a fire district or a post-09 referendum. And then on the right side, we have circuit breaker adjusted rates. So we have a bunch of rainy day funds at the start. That's not particularly useful. But what we have down here is Adams County's general fund. And you can see that for most taxing districts, we have the circuit breaker adjusted rate computed to be the same for the general fund as it is for the actual rate. But there are a lot of cases where the circuit breaker adjusted rate won't match with the actual certified rate. That's going to occur when you have circuit breaker impact within an individual taxing district. We also have built in a series of filters that you can apply if you want to look at the county unit, for instance, or one particular school district, or you want to see cases where a taxing rate is above 0. We have different ways you can filter that. We're refining the filters. Again, this is the development page right now. We're refining filters to get it down to the things that we think are going to be most useful, and to come up with ways that are to filter this that are going to be intuitive. But here, for instance, if we want to do taxing district 1 within Adams County, we're typing in 001, and we're going to say the filter is equal to. Again, that'll be modified to be a little bit more user-friendly. And it's thinking right now, but in just a moment, it's going to pull up for us taxing district 1, and we can see each of the tax rates and the circuit breaker adjusted rates within the abstract. So again, like with the rest of Gateway Abstract, we've tried to build this in a way that gives you the ability to filter and to sort and do the things that you want to do to really drill into the data. And then the other two things I want to show you on this are we have 2 export functions that we've built for circuit breaker adjusted rates, and we're doing the same for many of the other pages that we have on Gateway Abstract. The first one I'm going to show, and I'm going to hope this works on a computer that isn't mine. We're gonna pull up the circuit breaker adjusted rates text file. This is a new text file. It's going to look similar. We'll see if it comes open. It's going to look similar to the asserted rates file that's sent to you with your budget order. There it is. So this probably looks really familiar to you if you've ever actually opened up that asserted rates file itself. The only difference is these last 4 characters on each record. This is actually it's the last 6 characters. This is the circuit breaker adjusted rate for any individual unit, fund, and taxing district. What we're going to give you the ability to do this year, and this is new, and we hope it's a time saver, is we're exporting this so that it can be imported into your tax and bill software. Several months ago, we ran the file format by each of the vendors to make sure this was something that we were going to be able to accommodate, and we got really positive reception on this. This is something that is doable. But again, this is how you're going to actually get the circuit breaker adjusted rates into your local software. The other thing that I'll show you just really quickly on the abstract is we do have the ability to export this data to Excel. So again, it might take just a moment. The dev server is a little bit slower than a live server. But this is going to give you, if you want to modify the data or work with the data in Excel. I know many of us are, Excel is where we work. It's certainly the case with me. We give you the ability to do that, so you can filter and apply criteria and run functions, whatever you need to do here in Excel. We'll give you the same kind of features with assessed values and deductions and tax rates and levies and all those things. So I know I'm moving fast. That's the material I had to cover on the abstract. I have just a couple more things to go before I turn it over to Fred. Again, like Scott mentioned, we're going to be here for the next several hours, and we're going to be here through lunch. Pop by and ask me questions, ask Scott or Fred or Bob questions. If you want to talk Gateway Abstract, we'd love to talk about it with you. Just 1 or 2 final pieces I wanted to cover. These are important because of the time of year we're in. Budget certifications are coming. This is just like abstract, how it feels like we've spoken about it at 3 or 4 different conferences now. We've been doing this with the 12/31 budget order deadline. The budget order deadline is changed this year, so we're in the process now of reviewing local government budgets. Those that we're reviewing at the moment are taxing units that have already adopted, and that's most at this point, taxing units that have adopted and submitted all their budget forms. paired with counties that have certified assessed values, and we don't have reason to think are going to have to unlock or recertify their assessed values. We go through, this is a big process internally, the number of steps that are involved, software, half our agency has a different role in it at different points. But just by way of some sort of metric, and then tell you something that's coming, we've got the first thing that we do is our budget field representatives take your budget data out of Gateway Budget specifically, and then they pair that up with the net assessed value data that you submit on behalf of all the units in your county. And with that, we can compute tax rates. Well, our initial work through taxing units, which normally begins in the month of November after the November 1st deadline is passed, we started that back in mid-September, and we're currently a quarter of the way through the state, which for us is a big step forward. The December 31st deadline is going to be really ambitious, but we're busting our butts and doing the best we can to try to get there. Just a reminder on what these deadlines are. Budget orders have to be certified by December 31st. This was formerly February 15th, so it's about 6 weeks earlier. There's a modified deadline of January 15th. This is going to apply county-wide. If there's a taxing unit in your county, whether it's the county government or anybody else, a school district or municipality, that's issuing debt in December, that deadline is January 15th. And in the same way, if there's a taxing unit that's filing a shortfall appeal, that deadline is January 15th. 1782 notices, I would encourage you to take action on this week, or at the latest, the very beginning of next week. The most important thing I can remind you on 1782s right now is to update your 1782 notice recipients. If you think about the Gateway budget menu, we have what we call the accordion menu. That's the main one. It's kind of green and yellow. The bottom option is 1782 notice recipients. Please go in and update that as soon as you can to make sure we have the right people in there. A suggestion that we offer every year is that folks consider listing a backup 1782 notice recipient. So in this case, this is a taxing unit. We've listed 3 different recipients instead of just the auditor or the trustee or whoever it would be. I'd really encourage you to list a couple other folks, whether it's a deputy, a consultant you work with, it can be anybody, or even a backup email address for yourself. The reason that I'm emphasizing that in particular this year is, again, with the budget order deadline being December 31st, we have little choice but to work on these in the lead up to the holidays and even as we come into the holiday season. We expect to send out our first 1782 notices within the first week of November, maybe the second week of November. There's a good chance you received your 1782 notice in the past in January or even the very beginning of February. So this is significantly moving the calendar forward. So please have backups. It's possible that you're going to get these sometime around, in the days before Thanksgiving, in the days after Thanksgiving, in the days before Christmas. So we really encourage you to have backup folks listed as your 1782 notice recipients.
This is back to the development screens a little bit. This spring we had a new gateway entry screen that we had to navigate for CVET, FIT, and excise that was it was terrible. It didn't work right. When you put your entry in, hit enter, it would bounce back up to the top and you had to research again. Has there been any improvement on that screen?
Was that on Form 22?
Yes.
I don't know the answer offhand, but if we could, let's talk about it afterward and maybe we can try to demonstrate it and see if there's something we need to patch up.
Took a long time to get through it and I figured it affected everybody.
Sure. Okay, just 2 more quick things to show you. Again, this is something I'm showing you now because this is really the time we'd like folks to pay attention to it. So across the state, we've got a little bit over 2,400 taxing units. And across 2,400 taxing units, things are missed by accident. It happens each year, and we understand that. One of the things that's really easy to miss is the actual submission of your budget forms themselves. So you may have printed the Form 4 and had your counsel sign it. You may have marked certain forms ready to submit. But we see for one reason or another every year, some folks that don't actually remember to do the final submission itself. There's 2 different scenarios, but this is one of the 2 scenarios for what your final menu and gateway budget should look like. This is if you're a county or you're working with a solid waste district or a special unit that doesn't have debt, This is what your final menu should look like, green up and down, with the one possible exception being the debt worksheet. The bottom one, the 1782 notice recipients, that's the one that we just mentioned a minute ago. We do see folks, that one's not required. You don't have to fill it out, but please do, because we want to make sure we get the 1782 in the right hands. This is the one other case, if you're a unit, if you're a county that has debt, or if you're working with another unit that has debt, this is what the final menu should look like, all green. Just so you all know, the final day to adopt budgets is November 1st, and the final date to submit budgets is 48 hours after then. I think due to weekends this year, that means it's going to be November 5th. But please, just to be absolutely positive, go back into Gateway one more time when you get back to your office, end of this week, beginning of next week. Check to make sure that your budget forms are in. Check any binding units that the county adopts for, like again, a solid waste district, an airport authority, that sort of thing. Just make sure the budget forms are submitted, because we don't want anybody to end up with a consequence they weren't intending from something kind of procedural like that. So with that said, I'm going to hop down and let Fred come up. My contact information is here on the last slide. I'll be around for the next several hours, and thank you all very much.